Hey everybody, it's Ron, and I want to tell you a story about business and how that story changed everything. A guy named Sam sits at the end of a long conference table somewhere in Chicago. It's 1962. He's been in this room for the better part of an hour, making his case to the executives of a company he's made a lot of money for. He's got the numbers. He's got the logic. He's got years of watching customers in small towns spend money that the big retailers have decided isn't worth their time. The men across the table, they listen politely, and then they tell him no. Operating costs can't be cut the way you're describing, they say. Small towns aren't the right markets, they say. The margins won't hold. It's a nice idea, but it isn't going to work the way you think it will. Sam looks at him for a moment, then he gathers his paper. His brother, Bud, who's in the room, does the same thing. They push their chairs back, shake the hands across the table, and walk out of that conference room, down the hall, and out into the Chicago air. Here's what those executives didn't know. The man they just turned down was already their best franchisee. Sam and Bud Walton ran more Ben Franklin 5 and dime stores than anyone else in the country. Sam had already been quietly rewriting the Ben Franklin playbook for years, buying direct from manufacturers to cut out the middleman markup, letting customers walk the floor and pick their own merchandise off of the shelves at a time when most stores still had a clerk fetch everything for you. Those men said no anyway. So Sam Walton drove back to Arkansas with an idea, a brother who believed in it, and no corporate safety net underneath him. He was going to build the discount store himself. In the small towns, nobody wanted. At the prices, everybody said couldn't be sustained. So how do you walk out of a rejection from the company you built into a success and decide that's the moment to go bigger, not smaller? How do you look at a town of fewer than 6,000 people surrounded by Ozark farmland and not see a limitation, but an advantage nobody else has figured out yet? And how did all of that come together on July 2nd, 1962, when Sam Walton unlocked the doors of a 16,000 square foot building on the corner of Walnut and 8th in Rogers, Arkansas, and more than 500 people were already waiting in the parking lot? From Business Basics, I'm Ron Trucks, and this is Business History, the daily podcast where we explain the stories that changed business forever. Every date on the calendar has a story where business reshaped the world. Today, July 2nd, that story takes us to 1962. Small town, big idea. Now, it's important to understand that Sam Walton didn't stumble into retail. By the time he and Bud walked out of that Chicago conference room, Sam had spent the better part of 2 decades learning the business from the inside out. He had started as a management trainee at JCPenney right out of the University of Missouri, served in the Army during World War II, and came home in 1945 with a wife, a small loan from his father-in-law, and enough confidence to buy his first Ben Franklin 5 and dime franchise in Newport, Arkansas. He lost that store. The landlord declined to renew his lease, and Walton had to start over. He moved his family to Bentonville, Arkansas in 1950, partly because his wife wanted small-town living, partly because Bentonville sat at the corner of 4 states and gave Sam access to 4 separate hunting seasons for the quail hunting that he loved. There he opened Walton's 5 and dime on the downtown square. A Ben Franklin franchise he chose to run under his own name rather than franchisers. From that store, Sam built the largest independent variety store chain in the country over the next 12 years, eventually operating about 15 Ben Franklin franchises with his brother Bud. What separated Walton from other franchisees wasn't just ambition. It was the habit of watching what worked somewhere else and copying it without waiting for permission. Sam read about stores in Minnesota that had switched to what's called self-service, letting customers walk the floor and pick their own merchandise rather than asking a clerk behind a counter to fetch everything for them. He tried it in Bentonville. Walton's Five and Dime became the first self-service dime store in an 8-state region. Sam also started buying directly from manufacturers, cutting out Ben Franklin's middleman markup to push prices lower. His franchisor wasn't thrilled, but his customers were. By the early 1960s, Walton had a new idea: large discount stores in small towns, rural communities that the major retail chains had written off as too small, too spread out, too far from the money. Sam, he disagreed. Rural families had the same appetite for variety and low prices as anyone else. They just had nowhere good to spend. If you built a store big enough, stocked it well enough, and priced it low enough, customers would drive 40 miles to get there. He took that idea to Ben Franklin's corporate offices in Chicago. He was their best franchisee. He had the numbers, he had the logic, and, as I opened this episode with, they told him no. So Walton went home to Arkansas and built it himself. The store that opened on the corner of Walnut and 8th in Rogers, Arkansas on July 2, 1962 wasn't called Walmart. It was called Wal-Mart Discount City. A 16,000 square foot building in a town of fewer than 6,000 people, stocked with everyday merchandise at prices that the nearest big city competitors weren't even coming close to matching. On that July 2nd morning, more than 500 people were waiting when Sam unlocked the doors. By midday, the parking lot was full. Customers were driving in from towns 40 miles away, having heard about the prices, through nothing more than sophisticated word of mouth. Rogers, Arkansas wasn't a random choice. Walton had studied the highway intersections connecting Arkansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma, and understood that a well-placed store in a small town could pull from a much larger geography than its population suggested. Rural customers didn't have options. Sam was about to become one. His thesis held. Within 5 years, the Walton family owned 24 stores and was bringing in $12.7 million in annual sales. Sam flew his own small plane from town to town, scouting new locations, always looking for the same profile: a community the big chains had passed over, sitting at a crossroads that would pull customers in from the surrounding county. In 1969, the company was formally incorporated as Wal-Mart Stores Incorporated. The following year, it went public at $16.50 a share. By 1972, a decade after Rogers, Walmart was listed on the New York Stock Exchange with 51 stores and $78 million in sales. What Walton had proved wasn't just that discount retail could work in small towns. He had demonstrated that the conventional retail wisdom about where customers lived and how far they would travel for value was simply wrong. The major chains looked at a town of 6,000 people and saw a market too small to bother with. Walton looked at the same town and saw 40 miles of underserved customers in every direction with nowhere else to go. The men in that Chicago conference room had the same information Sam did. They just couldn't see past the assumptions of the model they were already running. By 1990, Walmart was the #1 retailer in the United States. That 16,000 square foot building on the corner of Walnut and 8th and Rogers had become a template. Nowadays, the average Walmart supercenter runs about 182,000 square feet, more than 11 times the size of that original store. Oh, By the way, 90% of the American population now lives within 10 miles of one. The scale of growth brought consequences that Walton's founding strategy hadn't fully anticipated, though. In 1985, Sam made a public commitment that would define, and eventually complicate, the company's identity. Walton wrote an open letter to 3,000 American manufacturers and wholesalers, pledging to buy more domestic goods and arguing that Walmart could make a real difference in preserving American manufacturing jobs. The Buy American program was genuine while Sam championed it. But the same pricing pressure that had made Walmart's model work from the beginning kept pushing the supply chain toward cheaper sources. Even before Sam died in 1992, the shift towards overseas manufacturing was already underway. The company that promised to buy American eventually became one of the most significant drivers of production moving to China. The low price principle and the Buy American principle turned out to be in direct tension with each other, and the low price principle won. The rural-only model evolved too, though that happened more slowly and more awkwardly. Walton's strategy was so deliberately focused on towns the big chains ignored that his successors spent decades trying to figure out how to crack major cities, and found it harder than expected. As recently as the mid-2010s, Walmart had no stores in 5 of the country's 25 largest cities, including New York, Boston, and San Francisco. The founding geography that was once a competitive advantage became, in some markets, a ceiling. Today, Walmart operates more than 10,500 stores and clubs across 19 countries. The sign above the door no longer says Wal-Mart Discount City. The hyphen came out in 2018. The Discount City was gone long before that. What remains is the core logic Sam Walton carried out of that Chicago conference room in 1962, that underserved customers with real purchasing power are worth more than conventional wisdom gives them credit for. The Ben Franklin executives who turned him down weren't wrong about the difficulty. They were wrong about the opportunity. That distinction cost them the future of American retail. I'm Ron Trucks, and this is Business History, the podcast that finds the turning points behind the headlines. To hear more stories like this, follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen. And if you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to subscribe and leave a quick review. It helps more people find the story behind the business. And if you want to actually understand business better without the fluff or the buzzwords or the MBA language, start by visiting us at businessdailypodcast.com.